And we're live.
All right. Welcome to another episode of Richest Media, everyone. I'm your co-host, Kamali Rose.
And I am Kwame Norval. Thanks for joining us. Real quick, apologize. I'm in the midst of moving. If you notice a little bit of a mess behind me, pay no attention to that. Oh, he had to zoom out and let y'all see it too.
All right. So we'll be a little zoomed in for Kwame's sake here today. Keep things nice and neat. All right. So thank you so much to everyone for being here. We appreciate your presence. If you can and you haven't already, do me a favor and like this video immediately. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and please hit the notification bell if it doesn't absolutely annoy you, so that you can receive notifications anytime we go live or launch a new video. So we're going to be jumping right into the news today, I think, and doing a little bit of, we're going to talk about a few news stories and do some discussion around that. We are focusing on the gaming industry, some news stories in the gaming industry, and just giving our left-wing analysis of that. So let's get to it. All right. First story up is that Rocksteady developer. Sorry, let me go from the top there. Arkham Asylum game developer Rocksteady has had some recent sexual harassment claims exposed, and we just wanted to present that to you and then discuss some of our reaction to that story. So give me one sec while we pull up. Using some new software here, so please bear with us on the little technology hiccups here.
We appreciate y'all.
All right. Games firm Rocksteady accused of inaction over staff harassment. This is from a Guardian article. This news broke in the Guardian this is from August 18th, Tuesday, August 18th. And this is from Alex Hearn, the UK technology editor there. And it says the byline is exclusive. Signatory of letter to bosses 2 years ago makes it public, alleging sexism continues. So we just wanted to show a bit of that article, and then we'll discuss. All right.
Yeah. We'll give you guys a little bit of context.
More than half of the women employed at the London-based video game developer Rocksteady 2 years ago signed a letter to bosses accusing the studio of failing to prevent sexual harassment and inappropriate behavior in the office, The Guardian can reveal. The letter, dated November 2018 and signed by 10 of the company's 16 female staff at the time, raised complaints about behavior, including slurs regarding the transgendered community and discussing a woman in a derogatory or sexual manner with other colleagues, and sexual harassment in the form of unwanted advances, layering at parts of a woman's body, and inappropriate comments in the office. So that article continues. I have heard everything from groping claims to incidents involving senior staff, all of whom are men. This is one of the signatories of the letter, who this letter was written in 2018. It's now 2020, of course, so 2 years later, and one of the signatories, has now made it public. And so this is the signatory who has made this public speaking, and she says, she's being quoted here. I have heard everything from groping claims to incidents involving senior staff, all of whom are men, she said. Yet the only thing we had as a result was a company-wide seminar that lasted an hour. Everyone who attended was asked to sign a statement confirming that they'd received the training. It felt that it was just a way for them to cover their arses. She said the letter was kept private in part due to the company's devotion to secrecy, which is not unusual in the video game sector, and in part because staff members feared that if they left on bad terms, they would be denied credit on the company's upcoming game, an adaptation of DC Comics' Suicide Squad.
So this is a pretty interesting one. It's completely standard, unfortunately, right now. For those of you who do not know or just joining us or newer to the video game industry, it is one of the latest industries to be kind of having a bit of a Me Too moment at this time. We're seeing it all over the place, so I'm completely not surprised that this would come up. The more surprising, I guess, and troubling thing is the fact that this is from 2018 and now just kind of making the rounds. I find it very interesting. Not so much what happened because, of course, unfortunately, anytime we have power imbalances, anytime we're in a capitalist system where we have that employee-employer relationship, it opens up room there for abuse. But the really interesting thing I find is that it is now coming out now, and the fact that they said that it seems to have persisted, especially that key thing about them only doing one little seminar, hour learning, talking about it. That seems to be a running theme. Anytime we see something happen with a situation like this, anytime we see something happen where there's some type of racial faux pas or issue at a large company, you'll see these kind of things happen. We at another time will touch on white fragility and people raising money on diversity trainings, but the studies show that they don't work a lot of the time. They don't work just like it would seem here. They're going to bring people in, they're going to hold these little seminars so the bigwigs can feel better about it without any real systemic change or any real change enacted. It's what we see as a common theme a lot of the time. And that's not just right now that we're seeing this. Eventually, we do hope to do another video. You'll see we'll talk about Ubisoft has had a ton of allegations come out about them. Same thing at Evo. Evo has been canceled for this year due to all kinds of allegations. The video game industry is really having a moment right now. And one of the reasons that we're seeing that in a continuing theme you'll see throughout this discussion that we have, not just on this, but it'll pop up later on, is due to a lack of a union. Without a union, without protection, these things will continue to persist.
Yeah. I agree with all of that, really. I don't have anything to push back on from you at all. I think that great point on highlighting just that these sensitivity trainings and these 1 hour seminars that they're putting on. This is by and large intended to cover the company's ass. I've been a part of these, trainings. I'm a software engineer. I've worked in the tech industry, spent a few years in there now, and I have seen it. It's not just the gaming industry. It's spread all throughout the tech industry and most industries at large. It's just that this has just got its own few unique components to it, but it's really I see it as like a capitalism on steroids in the tech industry, because it's really just high powered, hyper industrialized capitalism is all. And so this idea of like, they come and they do the 1 hour seminar and nothing changes, it is just very familiar to me. And it's something that I've seen in the tech industry where they bring these people in. It's often, gaslighting type of seminars anyways, where you feel you're as a marginalized person, you feel that, and you have the awareness that this is not made to actually, it's not really about dealing with these deep rooted issues or anything like that. They don't want to actually deal with those issues. Oftentimes dealing with those issues means an economic sacrifice for the corporation or company in some way, and they're not going to make that economic sacrifice if when it's damaging to their bottom line. Companies are very willing to use woke rhetoric, but they're very unwilling to make actual substantive change for people, or actually, deal with these issues when they come up. And so when something like racism or sexism and misogyny comes up in the workplace here, homophobia, transgenderism, transphobia. So those kinds of issues come up. They can't, the company doesn't want to deal with them in the meaningful way. They'll use rhetoric, and they'll use the language to say, oh, we support these groups and we care about these people. But they won't actually do anything substantive to the people who they have the power over. They're happy to speak out. It's like, a Nike who will use a Colin Kaepernick to come out and say all these things about, racism, or Gillette, did it with the toxic masculinity issue, and they'll come out and they'll release some ad, even though they've been part and parcel of the problem for, decades ahead of that. But they'll also, when you look at how's Nike actually treating the employees who they have power over, well, we see, it's exploitative practices, it's child labor, it's sweatshops, and that's what Nike's known for. But here they'll turn around and they'll use the language of, woke language and woke rhetoric, but not actually back that up with anything substantive. And in fact, they'll do the exact opposite, and they'll suppress this information. They will do everything they can to keep this out of the news. And oftentimes, the scary thing is, they don't necessarily have to do it explicitly. People are just so afraid. People are so afraid to lose their jobs that it's built into us, where we're afraid to speak out on these issues. You see something happening, and that speaking out might mean losing your job, and losing your job in this society could mean destitution potentially for some people. So it is even a privileged position of sorts in a way, to be the type of person that is even in a position to be able to speak out, because oftentimes you are just financially, you're not in a place where you can comfortably risk losing your job. And that's what we know the end result of speaking out tends to be, is losing one's job.
And it is, like you said, it's definitely a privilege. And that's what I talk about. I like to talk about a lot, about weaponizing one's privilege. I have a super dope lady who I will not name, but I will shout out, that I worked with at some point in my life, who pointed out to me that, she was willing to speak out more often and more comfortably, because, she was a white woman who was afforded a position of privilege where, she had safety nets if they were to put her on the chopping block, and she was going to use that as intended. And that is something that we have to do when we are able to speak out, because a lot of the time, like you said, people will naturally be silenced by the fact that, like, I could speak out, but then how am I going to feed my family when the other shoe drops? We know anti-retaliation is never real. It's like they say it's always anti-retaliation, but it's not true. You either people still feel the repercussions, and a lot of, like you said, or at best, it gets swept under the rug through a diversity training, which, like you said, for the people who are there, who go through and live it, it's like gaslighting to them. It's pointless. They are forced to go deal with this, and everybody else who could take something away from it usually feels so forced that they walk in tuned out already, because they would rather be somewhere else at that time than in that meeting. So if anything, it'll go away for a week, and then it smooths right back out. And that's not to even discuss the aspects of not making of substantial change, where you still have a disproportion where, like, you say all these things, but all of the guys at the top are still straight white males, and it skews their views and perspectives on things because you don't have those different voices. They aren't represented at the higher level conversations where it'll make a real difference. And at a different place in the article, we don't have to pull it up right now, they even pointed about little things where they had little disconnects where they were so off the same page. They talked about the design on Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn and someone else, and how hypersexualized it was. And some of the women had pointed out, and the dudes were like, wait, what? I didn't even think about this. And, it's just from top to bottom, we would benefit by having more diverse people in the room and in these conversations at all levels of the company. And that, a lot of these problems get solved by, our favorite thing to talk about, democratic workplaces.
Yeah.
That would go a long way of removing these power imbalances that allow people to have their fair say and being able to call these things out without fear.
Yeah, absolutely. How strongly I stand on that. And I think that on the issue of diversity, I think that companies will often preach this idea of diversity and looking for diversity, but what their real goal is diversity within a predefined set of corporate friendly bounds. And so
yes,
they want corporate friendly diversity. They don't want and oftentimes diversity does not include any layer of class into it. And so
yes,
they're totally fine getting, they want a diverse, rainbow, it's rainbow capitalism essentially is what they're looking for, where they want a bunch of people that are this pre-selected set of folks that are going to be favorable to these sort of exploitative capitalistic practices of always trying to, if you are willing to exploit workers, then it doesn't matter what color you are, they will gladly take you, and they will use your identity against you, color, your race, your gender, your
sexuality,
exactly, your sexuality, your anything that they can use, your religion, they will use that to try to show how diverse they are. But if you dare step out of line on anything that harms the bottom line of that company, then you, and let's be real, actual substantive change for people, the type of change that's actually going to substantively change somebody's life, is going to come from more than just rhetoric, and it's going to require more than just rhetoric. And what it often requires is, and you got you mentioned there, was the democracy is when we ignore that basic human right and say, okay, well, what do we believe are human rights to people? And if you believe that democracy is a human right, then you should, the same way that, maybe I believe that a dignified job is a human right. As long as we have to work, then we should be able to have dignified jobs with a living wage. I think that's a human right. I think housing is a human right. So I think that these things are human rights. And if you really believe something is an inalienable human right, then it means that why stop democracy at the doorway of the workplace? Why the place where the majority of adults spend the majority of their waking hours? Why are we not allowed to practice democracy there? Democracy being the simple concept of one person, one vote, and all major decisions affecting somebody. If something affects me, I should have an equal say in the decision-making process for that. And what that does is that enables people agency over themselves. And until you give people full agency over themselves, you're going, as long as we allow a small set of people, the employer class, to have power over the rest of the other class, the employee class, and that's the two classes of capitalism. That's what makes capitalism is the employer-employee relationship. We have to be clear about that because it's not always defined as such. Some people think that capitalism is free markets and decentralized planning, right? Private free markets, decentralized planning, and some people think that socialism is regulated markets and centralized planning, and that's their idea of capitalism versus socialism, instead of just being, and that's not a good definition of it, as Richard Wolff had, recently talked about in a video of his, where he said, you have to define these things properly, and a definition has to allow us to differentiate between two things. We define a dog as a dog so that we can differentiate it from all the other animals. We define a chair as a chair so that we can differentiate it from other pieces of furniture. So if we're going to define capitalism as capitalism, so that it should be in a way that we can distinguish it from all the other economic systems. But other economic systems have had free markets, they've had markets, and they've had decentralized planning or private ownership. And so, other things have had private ownership and free markets. And those systems aren't, feudalism had it, slavery had markets, right? You had a market for slaves, you had a market for the things that the slaves produced, like the cotton and other crops, the tobacco and things like that. And so these things aren't, you have to define it properly. So we're talking about whenever you give somebody that employer-employee power, that power as an employer over an employee, that automatically gives them the power to abuse that in some way. They can, that's then power to be abused, where now all of a sudden somebody has the ability to, at their whim, take away somebody's job. And what that means is that if somebody has that power over you, the marginalized person, are going to have a really difficult time speaking out in a situation where some group of people have this power to just suddenly take that away from you. If you had a democratic workplace that said, no, the only way for somebody to be removed is if we all get together and we all get to hear the information. And because a democracy requires a well-informed citizenry, people have to be provided the information. That's the only way a democracy will function, is if people are provided the information. And that means that there has to be transparency, and people would have to be given the information and be able to make a decision. Now, who do we think should be fired in that situation? If somebody is, reporting valid claims and has evidence, to show that they are being, or a pattern is being established, that they are being harassed, then, they should have the agency to, if they have to, have the person threatening them essentially removed from the workplace. One, if they have to, that person, you shouldn't be forced to work with somebody that's, sexually harassing you. We can do things like trainings and things like that, and then, and reintegrate people into workplaces later on. But we would definitely, you would expect that the assurance of safety, at least in your workplace, at the minimum, that basic safety. And so, but you would have that agency in a democratic workplace to one person, one vote on a major decision like that. Is somebody going to be, fired? What's the firing process like? How do we do? Yeah.
And on top of that, I just have 3 quick points to make. One, especially with what you're saying about, having that agency over people. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Most people's health insurance is tied to their job. So firing someone is a much bigger thing. And having that fear of speaking out is a much bigger thing when your health insurance goes with your damn job when you speak out. Yeah. So that is another very important thing that we need to remember. Also, tying it together about diversity and versus diversity for diversity's sake, and rhetoric and substantive diversity and change. Odd example, and I not to defend these two bozo the clowns, but look at Diamond and Silk. That was the diversity for the conservatives, right? Yeah. And now they got shit canned, and they're speaking out that, hey, maybe there's systemic racism going on the right and at over in that area. And you know why? Because that was diversity for diversity's sake. And as soon as they affected or threatened the bottom line, out the door. And that's what happens when you have diversity for diversity's sake. And that's what happens when you allow yourself to be the diversity for diversity's sake. Yes. You may get a seat at the table, but you aren't there for the whole lunch.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And I do want to clarify real quick. and we'll definitely touch on this in a later upcoming video, because I feel like it's kind of it's going to need its own segment and point to kind of unpack as well. I believe we dropped the link in the description. Some people have come out who are said to have originally signed the letter and have made a statement defending Rockstar. We
Rocksteady.
only just Rocksteady, sorry, Freudian slip, because we have a crunch conversation coming up later, I guess. But they made a little. They did put out something defending Rocksteady, and we just found that out as we were putting together our info for this video, and we do want to definitely give that conversation the deeper dive it deserves, because it's not as simple as what it is. We do have some thoughts on it, but we will be doing a part 2 video, follow-up video on this to go a little bit deeper in that response as well. We do want it to be out there, though, that a response has been made for that, and we have some thoughts on that we can't dive that deeply into in this video. But definitely tune in for that.
Yes. And one thing that we did want to dive into in this video was just to, to do our due diligence here and to at least let you hear the statement back that was the response from Rocksteady themselves on this issue. So this was the Rocksteady response that we want to bring to you here.
And this is prior to what I just said. This is a follow-up on that. This is prior to the people who came out defending Rocksteady. This is going to be Rocksteady's response to the immediate reaction when this article first broke.
Yep. Rocksteady acknowledged it had received complaints about sexual discrimination and harassment. From day one at Rocksteady Studios, we set out, and this is a quote, "From day one at Rocksteady Studios, we set out to create a place where people are looked after, a place fundamentally built on respect and inclusion," a spokesperson said. Quote, "In 2018, we received a letter from some of our female employees expressing concerns they had at the time, and we immediately took measures to address the matters that were raised. Over the subsequent 2 years, we have carefully listened to and learned from our employees, working to ensure every person on the team feels supported. In 2020, we are more passionate than ever to continue to develop our inclusive culture, and we are determined to stand up for all of our staff. Last Thursday, after The Guardian contacted Rocksteady for comment, management called an all-staff meeting where they discussed the letter for the first time. New initiatives were promised to prevent further discrimination, The Guardian understands."
So this is, and again, we're gonna dive into that response from some of the people previous. But real quick, it's weird that people are coming out defending it. They're saying that they made changes and all of this stuff. But immediately after that, The Guardian reports that they held an all-hands meeting and discussed it for the first time last Thursday. This letter was written back in 2018. So which was it? Did you have the discussion and make the substantial changes back then? Or did you hold an all-hands meeting on Thursday to discuss what happened?
Yeah.
Because something's not adding up quite there.
Yeah.
At least not to me.
And I trust The Guardian, and they're going to be careful in their reporting. This is The Guardian; it's a trusted outlet. They're going to be careful in their reporting here. And when they say that when they report it as for the first time, that means that's based on their reporting. So somebody, based on information that they received, they're saying that this is the first time that this letter was addressed within the company. This is the first time that employees within the company have said that it's been addressed. And so this is, it's so clear that they've based on this reporting, it does not seem like they have taken this issue seriously outside of covering their own asses, as the woman, was quoted, that signatory was quoted as saying earlier. It looks like all they've done is try to cover their ass. And this is what I've certainly come to expect from the tech industry and the gaming industry. And we see it, we know we got to talk about it in gaming in general. It's a very, it's a bro-y ass culture. It's really, it's a misogynistic culture in gaming that
exclusionary
it's
boys club. It's a boys'
Yes.
club. It's exclusion. I am a diehard, and as you'll know, or those of you who know me, those of you who continue to watch, you'll know I am a diehard video gamer. I'm a diehard gamer. I'm a diehard horror fan, and I will always say that those two cultures are two of the most exclusionary, bigoted boys' club of cultures ever. Like ever, ever, ever. Even when you see people try to diversify, when you see game companies try and push for diversity as far as like having black characters or female characters, the fan base is like dragging them back and being like, nah, we don't want that change. So it's we tell you there's this is a long time coming, this reckoning. We, like I said, we definitely will do some of the stories on the other places like the Ubisoft shakeup. Evo is especially troubling. So it's top to bottom. It's not just power imbalances of employee employers. There's issues around streaming culture. There's issues around partying. There's a whole lot, and it gets even more troubling when you recognize that this is a place that a lot of kids and younger people frequent too.
Yeah.
So we have to have these conversations. It's pretty vital that we do, and we'll continue to. So definitely look for a follow up on this Rocksteady conversation coming soon. On the response of the employees who defended Rocksteady, and look for a separate also video on us talking a little bit more on sexual harassment and other allegations going on in the gaming industry, because this is a bigger topic than just one video.
Yeah, absolutely. This is it deserves, a lot of attention of its own, and we certainly intend to give it that attention and call it out wherever we can. And so please just keep checking back for more on that. All right. So thank you so much to everyone that's here with us. If you haven't already, please do us a big favor and hit that like button. Takes you a half a second there. Just hit that like button. It's somewhere down there somewhere. And so you just press that like button, and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You got to subscribe so that you can get, and hit that bell to receive notifications anytime we go live or launch a new video. And that way, you can support the channel through helping us to grow. We also could use your support. We really need support on Patreon. We need in order to keep the show going and growing, we need some funding. And so we would deeply appreciate your support. Head over to patreon.com/raisedfistmedia. You can see a link down below here, but we will also include the link in the description box. It's not there yet, I believe. I apologize if it's not there yet, but just head on over, type that into your browser, patreon.com/raisedfistmedia, and drop us a few dollars for, just a few dollars a month, or $1 a month, even if that's all you can afford. Whatever you can afford, we really appreciate it. It's the only way to support independent media and allow it to exist is by funding it ourselves. That's the only way it's going to work, and that we're going to be able to get this type of information out to the places where it matters, and to try to actually break through the sort of mainstream, typical narrow lens that these issues are viewed through. So if you appreciate this analysis and you would like to see more of it, then please do us a huge favor and support on Patreon. That's patreon.com/raisedfistmedia. Thank you so much to everyone for being here. We really appreciate you. Please leave your thoughts in the comments. We love to hear from the community. So please share your thoughts in the comments. We will read those comments and react and engage, and we love to engage with the community. So please, we read every comment. So if you're not here in the live chat, still drop a comment below if you're watching this later, and let us know what you think. We appreciate you being here as well, and we will read every single comment and try to respond to them all. So thank you so much. All right, next story up.
Yeah.
So we have a battle of the richest, and we got some tech giants duking it out here in a legal battle. Epic Games is suing Apple and Google, and let's discuss why and some of our reactions to that as well.
Clash of the Tech Titans.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this is from an article in where is this from? The Verge, I believe.
I believe it's The Verge.
Yes, this is from an article in The Verge. Sorry about that. And it's titled Apple's Fortnite Ban Explained. Epic Games is suing the iPhone maker for antitrust violations. And this is by Sarah Morrison. It's from August 20th. Now, let me read from this article here. Epic Games, the creator of the hugely popular game Fortnite, is suing the company, claiming that its Apple Store practices violate the Sherman Act. Epic says that Apple's requirement that all mobile apps come through its App Store and the 30% commission Apple charges for app sales and in-app purchases is a monopoly, and that Epic, as well as its fellow developers and their customers, should have alternatives. Apple, a $2 trillion company, has not only refused to consider changing its lucrative business model, but it's also kicked Fortnite out of the App Store. And now Apple is threatening to cut off Epic's access to its developer tools program, which could affect any apps that the company's Unreal Engine and therefore any consumers, which could affect any apps that use the company's Unreal Engine and therefore any consumers who use those apps. So,
Boy.
yeah, if folks aren't familiar, I mean, Unreal Engine is used all over the place.
Everything. Gears of War, to fighting games, racing games, indie games, everything. There's a reason that Epic has a lot of money, and there's a reason Epic was big before Fortnite. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Unreal Engine. For those of you who do not know, when you create a video game, you don't just open your computer and like slap down the images or the zeros and the ones. There's different softwares that you use, one of which is a game engine. It's used to power the physics. It handles a lot of that hard work for you, so you can it takes a lot of the busy work out of it. That's what the Unreal Engine is, and that is used in so many games. That's why this is going to be something that'll have ripple effects depending on how it plays out.
Yeah.
And
so I just want to read one more thing from this article, just to give a little bit more context, and then we'll come back and get your analysis on this. So, as Recode's Peter Kafka explained last week, apps on Apple mobile devices have to go through the company's App Store, which charges a 30% commission for app purchases, as well as any purchases made within the app itself. As a freemium game, Fortnite makes all of its money through in-app purchases of its virtual currency, and Apple gets a cut of that. When Epic attempted to get around this by offering customers the option of purchasing Fortnite currency directly from Epic at a discount, Apple kicked Fortnite out of the store for violating its terms of service. Epic responded with a lawsuit, joining an ever louder chorus of developers and legislators who have accused the App Store of monopolistic practices, given its total control over the apps offered on its devices. All right. So what are your thoughts on that?
Man, this is a complicated one. It's very complicated, as all things, especially when it comes to pricing in video games. It's going to be a little more complicated than what it is on the nose. My immediate response will, of course, be, it's good for the shakeup. Smaller developers, 30% is a lot. It can stifle a lot. It's things like that lead to junk apps going up there with predatory in-app purchases. There's a lot of reason. On face value, I understand where Apple and Google's argument comes from. They'll tell you things like this is to ensure the safety of our users so they don't go into an app and sign up for something that they have to spend $200 on that doesn't do anything for them or rips them off. So that's why you have to go through our store or not have in-app purchases that cut us out. They'll say it's for security. I understand that argument. I get that. At the same time, though, in actuality, we know practically the real reason that they leverage this most of the time is going to be to make sure they get their cut, to make sure they get their fair share. And they'll hide that behind the guise of protecting users. It may be a little of that, but we know the real actual reason why. Where it gets messy, for me at least, is that, yes, I do agree with Epic, but this is one of those times where I find myself defending someone in spite of their own shittiness. And I'm trying to keep consistent on my morals here, that I will give credence to what they're saying, and it is correct, but this is a lot of people being right for the wrong reasons. Epic is not some savior. They're not some super pro-consumer, a bastion of goodness here. This is the same Epic that has denied tons of Black creators any type of financial restitution or acknowledgement for the games, for the dances and the moves that they've taken wholesale, renamed, whitewashed, and sanitized, and made profit off of in their game. Because Fortnite is a free game, but you do pay for skins, and you do pay for those dances that they do. So when they're doing they're doing any of these dances, or they're dabbing and stuff that's created by Black culture, like Blockboy JB, I believe, did a dance that was taken by them. A lot of them
Millie
were
Rock,
taken.
I think they took.
The Backpack Kids dance that the kids do that I can't do. All of that taken. A lot of that was taken from hip hop and Black culture, and they would rather be sued than even break bread with a lot of these people. A lot of them up and coming people who could definitely use that money, and Epic paid no mind to care about these people. These are the same people who have routinely pissed off a lot of PC gamers by signing exclusive deals and throwing their money around, not to make their own exclusive games, but to deprive other stores like Steam or Good Old Games and other store platforms, to deprive them of being able to host these games or sell these games with exclusive contracts, things that are decidedly anti-consumer. So for Epic to now mosey on up here and say, "Oh, we're the good guys. We're doing this for the consumers," it's disingenuous. They're fighting the right fight, but let's not feel too sympathetic for Epic. If there's anyone, we see the numbers that Fortnite does. If there's anyone that can deal with this, it's definitely Epic. The one good thing that they have done here is questioning that 30% cut. And that is one thing that they've used to court people rightfully to the Epic stores. They take a smaller cut. And so it is a complicated thing. What are your thoughts?
I think that, as to what you said about, I think great point about the Fortnite, dances, and the fact that they are, they are no angel here. Of course, but they are on the right side of this issue, and that's the important thing to note. And the first thing that we should note and be clear on is that they are correct on this issue. They are on the right side of this issue in particular, and for that, it's a good thing that a giant like that, one of the behemoths of the gaming industry, is on the side of the indie gamers in this situation, because as a developer, we should have grabbed Google's the breakdown for Google's numbers. I don't know how much it is that Google takes, but it's way less
30.
than.
I think it's 30% across the board. I think that's
really
like 30% industry standard. Steam does it too. That's even
wow.
the weirder thing that like this is an industry standard, and that's what also makes this feel a little superficial, that Epic's only targeting Apple and Google rather than calling out the industry as a whole. That 30%, to my knowledge,
where else though? But where else would it exist outside of Apple and Google? Because Steam. Okay, yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we're talking about the big players. The big players, 30% is the standard. That's why Epic, I think, does 15 or 10%, which is what makes it such a big deal here. But yeah, it is like you said, Epic is in the right on this one. It's just really weird, the battle that they're picking, and we're not doing it or calling out people across the board. And again, I could be wrong. Feel free to fact check me on this. But I'm pretty sure 30% is the standard across the board, which is the better question and something we definitely need to take a look at. And
oh Jesus! Yeah, no, you're right about the 30%. It is 30% on Steam. It looks like Android. It looks like it's 30% across the board. Valve does some small thing where they have some program where developers can keep an additional 5% of revenue if their game brings in over $10 million in sales through Steam. So for the biggest, largest developers, they're giving them a break on the people that are making the most money, apparently, and not the smaller developers.
I remember, and they I feel like they only added that recently to counteract Epic calling them out for it. And people pointed that out also, like, hey, this is only going to help out the people who don't need it. This doesn't, if you did it in reverse, that would make more sense to me. We start at 10%, and once you hit 1 million, we go up to 30, because at that point, you're doing all right, buddy. Like, sure. If you want to go through that with me, sure, okay. But otherwise, it hits as real gross, and this leads back, and this leads us to, this ties back to our last video that we did talking about raising the price of games, because again, when you have that raising the price of games conversation, and you take into account that 30%, and then what the publisher takes before it even makes it back to the developers, because we're now talking about publishers who publish the games to these storefronts getting their cut. It's even more diluted before it gets to the developer. So this is why developers are making slave wages. They're the code monkeys, and makes our last story even grosser, and why they don't have that security. It all fucking ties together and feeds together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's even more the people that are even, lower down the totem pole, the game testers, the QA folks.
QA, yep.
Yep, like those are the folks that it's even more, egregious with, because they really are. They're making next to nothing, while all these profits are being made. And let's be real, even all this stuff like the money coming back and how much percentage they take. Of course, that impacts indirectly. That impacts the actual developers doing the work. But most, for most developers, most developers do not work on AAA titles. Most developers are working on smaller titles, and we can talk about the gaming industry, and we should, but this stuff trickles down throughout the entire tech industry. Like the gaming industry is like the best place to work in the tech industry. Let's be real. It's like the other places you don't get the fame, you don't get the prestige, and you get all the same exploitative practices. And so when you get into when you're a software engineer, it's like, the game industry is sort of what you can aspire to and stuff. But then most people end up working outside of the games industry. There's just not enough jobs in there. And so
and I would even challenge that, because then you even run into that problem that you run into with teachers, where it's like, I love this job and I'm passionate about this job, so I'm willing to put up with even more bullshit. So it's like a 50-50 of if it's better or worse. Like, yes, you get the glam and the glitz, but then you get stuff like what we didn't point out in that Blizzard video we did last time, where Blizzard was underpaying its workers, and in their offers, when they were saying, hey, you're underpaying us, they were like, but you're getting to work on a prestige title like Blizzard. That's something you can't put a price on.
Yeah, no,
So
they absolutely do that, and that's something that they do to all in all jobs, like you said, teachers, nurses. They use this like they try to
your
give
passion,
you
they
say
play
that
on
they're
your
paying you
passion.
some sort of psychological wage of like exactly doing good, and like and that's somehow supposed to contribute when you can't, I can't go and like pay for groceries with like my your feel good stories and like your uh that sort of thing, like just
You
doesn't, it
can't,
doesn't pay the
you can't,
bills.
the doctor is not going to do your kidney transplant just because you worked on Diablo 4, homie. That costs money. All
Yes,
right.
yes, for
So
sure. Absolutely.
it's, yeah.
And the yes, absolutely. I think that sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I apologize.
Oh, my bad.
Yep, no worries, no worries. So yeah, on
It's
the
gross.
yeah. Let's If you haven't already, I see folks are here in the stream. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't already, please do us a favor and hit that like button. You have no excuse not to. You need to hit that like button right now.
Yeah.
Hit the like button. And then also, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell to receive notifications so you can be notified anytime we go live or launch a new video. Thank you so much to everyone that's here. I see we have a few comments, so I want to just flip to a few user comments and we can respond to those. Dark Sage 9117 says, honestly, Microsoft and Sony are making a mistake pushing the new consoles to come out this holiday season. I personally do not think we need a new console, as the Xbox One and PS4 to me still have a huge shelf life. But if this is what they want, 2021 seems more like an optimal time to bring out the consoles. This is really this ties in directly to our next story. So Dark Sage, I hope you stick around for the next story, because we're going to talk more about the delays in the gaming industry right now and things getting pushed to 2021. And I think I'd love to hear your thoughts on the next story as well, Dark Sage.
Yeah.
Any response?
I am kind of mixed on it. And I think that there's two factors to it. I do think that it is a very poor time, especially with how much it's going to cost. These new consoles are probably not going to be, everything is saying they're not going to be cheap with all of the hardware and everything going in there. It's going to be a pretty big jump. I think that this goes to kind of speak to, like you said, yeah, it's definitely financially motivated.
Yeah.
I think it goes to speak to, and why I've kind of championed a little bit more Microsoft this generation. I have both consoles. I'm not a fanboy by any means of the imagination. I care about which company's being most pro-consumer. So far, Microsoft has been talking the talk and trying to walk the walk of pro-consumer. And I think that they're making it a little bit more accessible, like zero interest rates. They're doing what they can to get the console to people, zero money down if you want to pay it off with live included, versus having to shell out for the box. But the key thing that Microsoft is doing is, and this is what people have been hating against them for, is they don't care if you buy the new Series X. They don't care if you buy the new console. They care if you get into their ecosystem with Game Pass, which will allow you to pay it on your old system or your computer or your phone or whatever, if you don't have the money to go out there and buy a new console right now. And that is what I applaud them on. They're trying to do it in a way that's not leaving gamers behind, especially in a financially tough time. And I'm not trying to sit here and cape for a company, a billion-dollar company, but I do think that they are trying to kind of ease that over. So, like, if we do got to do this, like, they're giving people avenues to still be included. And I feel like that's where Sony's kind of going a little bit wrong here when they're doing anti-consumer practices or forcing people to do things like play the Spider-Man game on the new console when it looks, for all intents and purposes, like it could have been DLC that was maybe scaled down a little bit to run on the old console, versus forcing you to shell out what's probably going to be no less than $500 to play this game. And I think that is something to take into consideration. I agree. Part of me agrees with the pandemic. It's not a great time to ask people to spend a ton of money right now. I also can understand why it might hurt if it gets postponed a little. It's real complicated. I don't want to pretend to know the behind the scenes working, but I definitely hear you on that, Dark Sage. It does feel like a really poor time to kind of do this, and I really hope that the industry as a whole is taking a look at and rethinking a lot of how we're running things right now, giving everything that's happening in it looking like we're about to hit a major financial crisis. We have to be more creative. Microsoft seems to be pivoting to do that. I hope more people follow suit because the gaming industry can be recession proof if it handles the right way and whatnot.
Yeah, I think that I don't think anything is really necessarily recession proof.
Or recession proof, but yeah,
if people are suffering, you know, if working class people, if you know, there was just people were just making an extra $600 a week. 30 million Americans were making $600 extra a week. That they now have $600 less a week, like for 30 million Americans, because Congress has failed to continue the unemployment benefits. They're not providing any sort of universal basic income in the midst of this, you know, global economic destruction and disaster and global pandemic and mass unemployment. In the wake of all that, if Congress doesn't respond and we don't get actual, you know, some substantive material support to people, to the masses of people, then I don't think the gaming industry will be recession proof. I think that what we're looking at is a global economic crisis, and that the gaming industry is going to be damaged through that, because gaming, you know, let's be real, that is not a top tier priority purchase for most people. And it is entertainment, and people do need entertainment to a certain extent, but you're definitely reducing your game purchasing. And if you have $2,400 less a month, like the first one, that's going to be one of the first things to go. It's not, you got to pay rent, you got to pay for food, and you got to get those out of the way. You have to have those things in order to be able to play the video game. You know, you need housing, you need a home, and you need food in order to be able, you need television, electricity, you know, internet, you know, so you have to have these basic things covered. Or I do think that the gaming industry is going to suffer from that, and that launching in 2021 is going to hurt sales and all that sort of stuff. And that's fine if they're still capable. These companies can take the loss. They already take a loss on gaming consoles anyways, so they can take the loss. I don't see a need to rush I would totally be understanding if they said, you know what, game consoles cannot be launched until 2021. So I don't see a reason not to push, but this has a lot of connections to our next story. So let's,
real
do you have any last thoughts on the issue of Apple?
One thing I was going to say, as far as it not being recession proof, what you're saying is correct, but there's two things just to consider though. One, gaming sales might get wonky, and what you're saying is true, but gaming actually kind of across the board, if I'm not mistaken, went up as the pandemic hit and people quarantined. So
yeah, if we're talking about game playing, like that for certain, those are I should definitely separate that out and say, you know, I'm talking about game purchasing and the industry and the health of the industry, and the industry is based on more things being purchased, not on, and that means even in-app purchases, not just like
we're also not the only market. It gets even more complicated too, because we're a major market, but not the only market. Also, depending on the system and the type of games you're talking about, it gets even weirder where like this will affect, but I feel like it might affect US development and the industry side of the industry, because so much of it is worldwide at this point now that I don't want to say wholeheartedly, but I'm actually really curious to see how this plays out when the video game industry isn't just like Hollywood being affected is one thing we're seeing at a very large scale worldwide, but with so much of this work not being done just in the US and so much of the development still being able to be done remote, I'm curious if that will maybe make this be a little bit different. And I think that may be why people throw around that term, which shame on me, I should have spoke a little more carefully, but I think that may be why people call it kind of recession proof, so to speak.
Yeah, and I can understand, but as we've seen with like the 2008 crisis, you know, these recessions and depressions, because we have a global economy now and everything is connected together. When if the U.S. economy crashes, it means that there's less consumer purchasing power to buy those goods outside, even if they're being produced outside of the U.S. And also the crisis and the economic crisis is not going to be localized to the U.S. If we are the first, you know, domino to fall, that we're going to take down a bunch with us. And so there is still going to be, you know, the UK and all these other economies that are interdependent on one another in the global economy. I think that they're all going to be impacted. And even if a lot of countries have been handling the crisis a lot better than us and dampening the effects of like the economic effects and not turning a health crisis into an economic crisis, that wasn't, you know, it's something unique to a US capitalism that did that. But that's the same way it went with the 2008 housing crisis. The US was just the first, you know, domino to fall, but then we took down the rest of the global economy with us. And so I definitely think that can have a sort of propagating effect throughout the economy. And so I do think that will have some global impact and will reduce the amount of games being bought. Like the goods being bought are being reduced down. I don't doubt that games will be played more because people are going to be stuck inside and have less, you know, you have less reason to go out than ever. And what better thing to do than be on the internet in some way, you know, be on gaming, be on social media. So I absolutely think those things are going to increase. And we've seen that from the tech industry has been monopolizing, and like they just, a report just came out how the S&P 500 hit a record high under the tech industry, and giants like Apple was literally the leading one that has now, they think, might be the first company to go over $2 trillion market value. So they think that Apple will be the first $2 trillion company now because they damn near doubled their market value in over the course of the pandemic alone. So these are just disaster capitalists. These, you know, folks coming in.
Google was on, I'm pretty sure
Google, Microsoft, we're all in there, you know. So like these giants are in Amazon, and these giants,
Amazon definitely,
and these giants are monopolizing power in there, and so we just have to be wary of these, and that's why we, you know, pushing back for bringing it back to the Epic versus Apple and Google thing. Any push against monopoly, that is a push in the right direction, you know. And
even if the wrong person saying it, even this is like when Tucker Carlson calls out a monopoly, it's like, you're terrible, but you're right on that one point. I'll give you that. Absolutely. Just because the voice is wrong, they're right.
Exactly. And so like Epic here is on the right side. We can't emphasize that enough. And that they're fighting a fight that is going to benefit the developers downstream, because 30% is an absurd amount for one company to take that has absolutely they have nothing to do with the production of this game. Why do you 30%? You're just a middleman. Why do you need 30%?
It's like on some mafia shit. It's paying the boss the cost of doing business on their block.
Out of every single transaction in your game, and not just the sale of the game, but then in every internal transaction in the game. Now they have to, and then if you dare to build a system yourself that could work outside of their system. So you're like, listen, okay, you claim that I have to do this because I'm working on your platform, and I'm forced to you know, like I have to utilize your like payment system and that sort of thing, right? Like for one, that's monopoly right there, right? If Apple is the only app store allowed on their phone, right, then you have a monopoly. The same company should not be able to make devices and then also own the store on those devices. It's like what Amazon does when they can be, because they're both the store owner and a seller of goods on that store as well. And a lot of these companies will come in and they sell on their, you know, they have first party, you know, products that they will push on those. And so Apple, for instance, has like iTunes and those things, but
Yeah.
most of them are free. I think, I don't know if Apple has paid. I think they have some paid apps. I don't know, like the fancy versions of like iMovie and
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, they then, Amazon can both be the marketplace themselves and a seller on the marketplace. That's antitrust. That's breaking antitrust laws.
Real quick, one thing I do want to point out, a quick distinction between Apple and Google in this. That is how Apple works, and Apple has been called out numerous time and time again. With Google, it's a little bit grayer, and I think this is where they run into it, just because Google, you can have other marketplaces, you can sideload apps. There are multiple ways you can. Obviously, it's like the difference between saying something on Facebook where millions of people can see it and saying something on your medium where 2 people can see it. Like, you can make that argument with Google, but Google does have options. Whereas with Apple, like, you can't sideload without jailbreaking. Like, Apple, like, if you do not play business with Apple, you're cut out, period. And the other thing, I think they've always had the ability to buy separately. The issue that caused them to get booted from both was that they made it so that their currency can be bought cheaper than like, you can get it 25% cheaper if you buy it through the Epic Store versus directly through Apple. I think that's where the issue came, because to my knowledge, you could always buy V-Bucks, which is the Fortnite currency. They just made that change.
Gotcha.
To my knowledge. But yeah, we just wanted to clarify that. But yeah, I've been at times in the past a Google defender. I've been anti-Apple because I've always felt like they've been kind of anti-consumer, anti-innovation. They're very patent everything and stifle the industry, proprietary everything and stifle the industry. But they're all wrong on this one. Google's wrong, Apple's wrong, Epic's wrong a lot of the other times. They're right on this one, though.
Yeah, they're right on. Epic is definitely right on this one, and props to them, shout out to them, hats off to them for doing that, and yeah, and just for to join the fight and join on the right side of history and to fight. Good for them, pat on the back. And we should all be aware of these exploitative practices and to recognize it, because why do we have Apple? Look at them, they're amassing so much wealth right now, meanwhile, like, the mass of people like are not having their basic needs met, and that's not a just or fair system, and they're doing this all under a crisis. Like, they're using a crisis to their advantage to line the pockets. And that was the point that I wanted to make before that I kind of missed on this, which was just that when we talk about this money getting kicked back to the developers and eventually, and like the developers, that money doesn't often trickle down. When it goes back to the developer of the game, the company that developed it, that money's not actually trickling down to the workers, and it's not being used to then provide people with actual, fair wages relative to the profits of this game. And so, them making more money and more money going to the developer, I am always in favor of that, sure. But then we have to have the conversation about what these developers are doing with that money and with those profits. And again, it brings it right back to the exactly, and not just unionizing, but democracy in the workplace, where you then have, because even in a union situation, you don't get control of an equal vote in the decision making over what gets done with the profits of this company. And that's something that we believe in here at Raised Fist, and we believe in it so much that we're trying to build a democratic workplace ourselves here. And that's our goal. And that's our way of fighting back to actually build what we consider to be, modern economists consider to be an anti-capitalist workplace, a democratic workplace owned and operated by the workers, and where we have democracy in all of the decision making. One person, one vote. Anyone else that joins into this effort with us will also be given that democracy, and we hope to incorporate that democracy into the community as well, and hope to incorporate the community into our decision making process as best we can, because this is obviously non-capitalist socialist businesses like this have not existed for a long time, you know, with a lot of resources in order to help people out. And so we're trying to build this from the ground up, but by supporting the show, you can support that effort to build democracy in the workplace and to actually give people agency over themselves. And so, and that's the fundamental change, you know, I believe at least that we have to make in order to, you know, undo the destructive effects of capitalism and to actually, you know, provide a just, fair workplace and society for everyone. I don't think that we're going to get to the place of not seeing workers exploited until, or seeing developers exploited, seeing anyone exploited until we get to the point of democratic workplaces throughout. So if all the Apple employees had a vote on this, I doubt that we would be getting the same, you know, result out of this. So let us, I think we need to jump to our next story. I just want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you so much for being with us. If you have not already, you have no reason not to have by now. Please do me a favor and hit that like button below. Also subscribe to the channel and share this video out wherever you can, social media, share this out. And if you can afford it, please do us a favor and head over to patreon.com/radicaldemocracy. Patreon.com/raisedfistmedia. The link is right down below. So patreon.com/raisedfistmedia. Head over there, drop us a few dollars a month to support the channel, help us to continue to exist and to grow. And we will deeply appreciate you for that. We currently have one patron right now, one Patreon patron in Raised Fist, and I don't know who they are yet, but focus, I don't know if you can pull that up and find that, grab that information so that we can give them a shout out, because if they let themselves be known publicly, then I would like to give them a shout out. So shout out to our first Patreon patron. Thank you so much for signing up and for subscribing. That is huge. That is monumental. We deeply appreciate that. We appreciate you so much. So real huge shout out. If we can get that information, we will give you a personalized shout out here, but big shout out to our first patron. We really, really, really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody that's here with us. And if you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to receive notifications, and share the video on social media. We really appreciate it. It helps the channel to grow and to continue to exist in general. So with no further ado, I think I would like to start to get over to our final story of the day. But before I do,
it looks like I do have a name, just a first name, just the alias. We're gonna shout out. Thanks, Jay. You're our first Patreon.
How's that spelled? How's that?
Jay.
Jay. Okay. Thank you, Jay. Shout out to Jay. So just thank you, Jay. Thank you so much. So
we appreciate you so much. You're our first official patron. You helped us get that going. We cannot thank you enough. Special shout outs to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jay. Yes.
We can't do this without you.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, a little typo there. Sorry. There we go. All right. Shout out to our first. Oh, I'm just awful right now. Sorry. I'm too much cannabis, y'all. Too much cannabis.
Put some respect on Jay.
Shout out to our first patron, Jay. Shout out to Jay. Thank you so much, Jay. Thank you, Jay. We appreciate it. We love it. We love you. Thank you, Jay.
Eventually, we'll get more high tech and we'll have like balloons float up. And
yep. We'll have all that. And just
when we get
fireworks, actual real fireworks will go off in the backgrounds inside of our homes, wherever we are. We'll do it all. We got you. We got nothing but love for the community, and you know, it's folks like you that will be the reason that we continue to exist. So thank you so much. Shout out to Jay, and we will continue to shout out Jay and anyone else that can do us this solid. We need your support. Please support independent Black media, left-wing media, independent left-wing media. We try to bring a unique analysis and a unique perspective, try to bring in our lived experiences and into the discussion and into these, the news and the stories that we present. And so we really appreciate it. Please do us a favor, support, and head over to patreon.com/raisedfistmedia and join Jay in the revolution. And please drop us a few dollars a month, $1 a month, whatever you can afford. Honestly, whatever you can afford. It's massive. It means so much to us. And so thank you so much to everyone for believing and for making this happen. All right, let's get to the next story.
I know. Sorry, we had to delay the story for a couple minutes. But, you see that smooth segue right there, baby?
So
we're not the only ones delaying stuff.
Microsoft delays Halo Infinite to 2021. The Xbox Series X is still launching in November. This is this one is actually the actual Verge article, I believe, from August 11th by Tom Warren. And let's just read a bit from this article here to give you some of this context. So Microsoft and 343 Industries are making the decision to delay the launch of Halo Infinite to 2021. 343 Industries says the delay is related to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, as employees have shifted to work from home and development of large games has been particularly difficult for many in the industry. Quote, "We have made the difficult decision to shift our release to 2021 to ensure the team has adequate time to deliver a Halo game experience that meets our vision," says Chris Lee, studio head for Halo Infinite. "The decision to shift our release is the result of multiple factors that have contributed to development challenges, including the ongoing COVID-related impacts affecting us all this year. I want to acknowledge the hard work from our team at 343 Industries, who have remained committed to making a great game and finding solutions to development challenges. However, it is not sustainable for the well-being of our team or the overall success of the game to ship it this holiday."
Yeah, this is it's an interesting one. I've been seeing a lot of people saying some stuff about, they're using the pandemic as an excuse and whatnot, which is really weird because, so just to give you guys some context, a little bit more than that, Halo Infinite is the big flagship game of Microsoft. It's what made Xbox, Master Chief. Probably their biggest well-known franchise over Fable, over Gears of War, over Forza. It's probably Halo. And Halo Infinite showed at the Microsoft Game Showcase last month, and it had very mixed reviews, mixed feedback, because the graphics weren't all to what they should have been. A lot of people took issues with how it looked. The gameplay looked good, but the graphics left some to be desired. A lot of people had come out and were speaking out against this and saying that, this is a big issue. It needs more work. And so, to no one's surprise, they've decided to delay the game. I do want to definitely, talk about the thing that a lot of people aren't talking about here with the delay, even though, yes, I will say, first of all, I think it was the right move to delay the game. It'll be better for the consumers for them to put more work into it, and we'll get a better product for it rather than them send us or sell us something half finished. That is a great thing. They made the right decision. But with that being said, there are some unintended effects that come with that. And this is something that I've seen lost a lot in the conversation. And it wouldn't be a raised fist conversation if we didn't bring it back to the workers and the people. And we've already touched on how it's pro-consumer and a good thing for us. But let's look at the unintended side effects.
Yep. And to do that, we would like to start by presenting some information from an article in Kotaku by a great journalist, Jason Schreier, who has done a lot of great work on reporting on the conditions for working class people and essentially the labor issues in the gaming industry. So if you need, if you want to read you get some more information on that, Jason Schreier is a great resource. So this is from an article in Kotaku written by Jason Schreier. And let me just read from that article. with very few exceptions, video game delays lead to more crunch, not less. The crunch will continue, and it continues on. The crunch will continue even if, as many studios, it's still called optional. Crystal Dynamics, also infamous for crunch, has a raffle system in which developers can acquire tickets and win prizes in exchange for their overtime hours, according to two people familiar with goings-on at the studio. This article continues on. I just want to read one last clip from there. And this is from the same Jason Schreier article in Kotaku. It says, it's natural for human beings to work hardest when a deadline is imminent. In video game development, where progress is nonlinear and the pieces might not all come together until the very end of production, the crunch tends to be the hardest at the last minute. That's why delays in the final year can be so difficult on developers' lives. All that extra polish has to come from somewhere. Crunch in the video game industry wouldn't be quite as harmful if it weren't coupled with so many other issues: high stress, low pay, inadequately trained managers, sexism, extreme volatility, and so on. The so on should be racism and so on. But delays can sometimes exacerbate them all. Delays might be good for games, but they're not always good for game workers. All right.
Yeah, it is. Crunch is and will always be a very hard conversation. Jason Schreier has done amazing work talking about it extensively. I would definitely point you in his direction. Not to point to another podcast, but Waypoint, Austin Walker, and them have
point to another podcast. We got no problem lifting up. We should definitely lift up our
other progressive and leftist voices. Austin Walker, who y'all know I stand to the death. Austin Walker and the folks over at Waypoint have done amazing coverage and discussions on crunch and how hazardous it is and how easy it is to fall into it. We've touched on it lightly back in our Blizzard conversation, but yet again, it is something so built in to capitalism, but especially the gaming industry, something so nefarious, and it gets to this scary place where, again, to tag back to the Rockstar situation with the Hauser brothers over at Rockstar. Even well-meaning people fall victim to this because they're passionate about it. They want to see it pushed across the finish line. And then your boss goes in and he thinks it's, he's not doing anything harmful. He's in there in the trenches with his coworkers, I'm going to be there with them to help finish across the finish line because this is my dream. This is my passion. And then the people below him look up and they see him there and they're like, well, I can't leave the office before he does. He's the big wig. That'll look bad to the higher ups. And then their coworker looks over and they're like, he's not leaving either. I got to tough this out because I can't leave him alone here. And it creates this cycle of even well-meaning people with the best intentions putting themselves into bad positions. It's the me and you have talked about it before, the vacation crisis that employees have, where it's like when you have that free vacation or that come in open time slot, you don't want to be the guy that does it when your coworkers aren't. So you end up not doing it at all. This is the problem with optional overtime. It happens anytime there's an optional meeting. Sure, it's optional, but everybody takes note of the person who doesn't show up. And a lot of people got comments about the people who don't show up. So how optional is it really? It gets to be very dangerous. And this is something that it needs to change. It needs to be a conversation, but we also have a conversation with our place as consumers and our place in it. When we get outraged and we flip out about delays, we're not doing it because, oh no, this is more crunch for the people who make the games that we love. We get mad because we have to wait a month or two to play the game that we want to play. And that is the wrong reason. When you put that kind of pressure on them, then they only go crunch harder. When you put that kind of pressure on them and they feel like, oh, people are going to be pissed if we miss this deadline, you guys just got to get in there and crunch it out till we finish it, you're putting more pressure on them. That's a change in the way we talk about it and what we do, where we need to stand in solidarity with these workers and advocate for them. When it comes time and that general strike comes to help unionize and bring democracy to their workplace, we need to support the developers for that. We cannot sit here and not defend the people who go and break their necks and kill themselves, literally sometimes, drives themselves into the ground to bring us these things we love without also acknowledging that. And if we're going to acknowledge it, we also have to be willing to fight on their behalf, because this is what they talk about. People throw around that term human cost of things, but there is a human cost sometimes, and we got to be real about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've got a few points I'd like to mention on this. And while I'm doing this, I don't know if you wouldn't mind, Kwame, but it looks like we got another Patreon patron. And if you could just grab that name and we will shout them out. So yeah, I think for one, you mentioned how it's the you mentioned how it's the gaming industry, and that where this is most prevalent. And I would just say this idea of like crunch, in the gaming industry. And I just want to say that, yes, it is the worst in the gaming industry. And as a software engineer, sorry to keep saying this, but when we're talking about these issues, I can't help but bring in my personal experience. But I've been very, hyper aware of that sort of black mark against the gaming industry, and recognizing the sort of that darkness of the gaming industry, and having that it's common knowledge that if you're going to get into gaming, that crunch that's where it's at its worst. You just know the sort of 60-hour work weeks, and that's going to be a part of the culture. And that's part of what kept me out of the gaming industry, was all of the stories that I heard when I was going through college, all the horror stories that I heard about people working in the gaming industry and being pressured into all the that crunch and that high intensity. I will say that when I went into other just software, I did web development, and I've done a little bit of game development, but mostly it was productivity application development on mobile, Android, iOS, and then web development. And I've seen the same sort of crunch mentality. And it's not just in crunch, it's just you're always expected to work beyond those 40 hours. Like there's always a deadline, these arbitrary artificial deadlines that they create. And there's already, what are these deadlines? It's just when we hope to get this stuff done. But the reality is that when you're building software, it is impossible. It is an impossibility to predict there are too many unknown variables when building software, where through testing and QA testing and QA controls, you're going to find and discover bugs and quirks in the game, or features that just don't work together. And that requires it's unforeseen issues that arise in the development of any kind of software. And it is completely, I've been tasked with trying to predict and estimate, how long is just a very small task going to take, 1 week, 2 weeks. So imagine having, you have to do that for tens of thousands of tasks, and try to actually figure out, how long are all of these thousands of tasks going to take? Or you end up creating these arbitrary deadlines, and then people are all pressured to say, okay, now this deadline's coming up, so I've got to get it done by this arbitrary deadline that was set. And then once those deadlines get stuck in people's head, it's like they have this expectation, and everyone has this sudden expectation that, okay, it has to get done by then, and there's nothing that we can do. And there's no question of really like, what does it mean if we don't get it done by then? Like what's going to happen? Does it mean that we can't, what do we have to just cut some of the features? Is that all we're talking about? Is it like, but the reality is like, they will use that pressure of like, I have to, this thing is, I want, you're working on this feature. It matters to you. Like when you're working on a feature and you want to see this thing that you've been working on, be put into the public sphere to be used by people. And it's a great feeling to have, and you want to get to that. And so you feel the pressure to try to do that as well. And again, it's all being done while there's no compensation for this. Or not an adequate amount of compensation for the mental toll that it takes on people, that having that crunch mentality, having to be forced into that situation. It can be, we don't talk enough about, and that happens across all industries, I would say. There's always, there's this idea that, these deadlines get set for whatever reason, and then all of a sudden a deadline gets set and everybody has to work to that deadline, and we really have to stop and ask ourselves, like, what is the actual value and purpose of this deadline, and is it really, what's the harm in shifting this deadline back? Like, what, even this idea of like setting these deadlines is so difficult to me. I hate when they set, like, okay, this game is, and I get it, you got to have, consumers need to have, but let's be real, like, I don't care if a game didn't have an exact release date until like a couple of weeks, like until it was done and they were just like, okay, it's going to release in like whatever. Like, I wouldn't mind that. Like, we have enough games coming out that there's a steady flow of games coming out all the time. I don't know why we need to know 2 years in advance that this game is coming out in 2022 and shit. Like,
I also think like the video game industry is kind of trying to course correct itself on this a little bit. We have things like early access now, which I find is a much healthier way of doing it, especially because you could take in money. Some people, they sometimes will do like, hey, you bought in when this shit was on fire, so you're only going to pay $20. It's not going to be $40 till it's ready, but you're going to help us bug test it. You're not getting a complete game. We're not charging you a complete price. That also opens up more fan feedback to be from the people who care about and are financially invested in the game to give their feedback. But that also has its drawbacks, because then are you beholden to the people who invested money, even if their idea isn't what's going to be best for the game or feasible or realistic? There's a lot of pluses and minuses. It's a really complicated thing. To shout out Jason Schreier again, he has an amazing, amazing book that I think y'all should go read if you're at all interested, called Blood, Sweat, and Pixels: The Triumphant, Turbulent Stories Behind How Video Games Are Made. That was absolutely eye-opening to me. I listened to it on Audible. It's a very emotional type of story that from everything from one man creating Stardew Valley by himself up to Bungie and their thing with Destiny and all in between. And crunch is a very common theme. The ways that people end up crunching is a very common theme. And it gets into like really weird things where you've got publishers threatening to pull funding for the game. A lot of it is things that, because it's a capitalist-based society and industry, and there aren't safety nets for a lot of these people to not be exploited, that they get put in some really, really bad positions, unfortunately. And we just democracy in the workplace would go a long way towards changing this, where if everybody could honestly say their honest opinion of, hey guys, this isn't healthy for any of us. Let's release the game in February instead of next year, instead of June this year, and let's all go home, come back with fresh minds, and not kill ourselves over this. And again, like you said, you're fine with waiting because there's enough games. We as an industry, as consumers and fans and people who care about the artists and the people who give us what we love, need to grow to also be more mature and be fine with that as well.
Yeah,
because it's not, these games aren't just shit out there by a computer. These are living, breathing people who are destroying their bodies, their minds, their mentality to bring us what we love. We need to also love them back and be willing to take that and say, you know what, it's okay, guys, if that game's not ready. I have other stuff I can play. And this is something we're seeing, that Kickstarter, early access, stuff like that is giving people more flexibility, but also being owned by, like, this is the good case of being owned by a big company, by Microsoft or a Sony, because when the time comes, Microsoft has other games in its stable and things on Game Pass. They can give people the breathing room to delay the game and make sure they turn out the best game possible rather than say, hey guys, you got to ship it or we're pulling your fucking funding.
Yeah.
We can't afford you to do this. All your work, you either do it or all your work goes down the drain. Same thing with Sony and The Last of Us 2. That is the only good thing about them being under bigger corporations where they do have that little bit of a safety net that they can free up some breathing room for these people. And we just a lot of things need to go into play where we have to change a lot of the things we're doing in order to make sure that we're not stretching people too thin. And it is a lot, like you said, there's that aspect of it's passion being used negative. It's a negative possibility, a positivity, unfortunately. It's almost a toxic positivity, I'd even say. You know, that you don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, they're exploiting your, there's a reggae artist that I don't know if this is a common saying, but he says, Barris Hammond says, don't take my kindness for weakness. And I think it's like, it's exploiting somebody's kindness as a weakness. And that's what they're doing. They're exploiting the fact that you care about what you're doing. You love that, you have a passion for gaming, which is what I know a lot of, and, software developers end up getting into development for in the first place. I know I did. It was through gaming that got me to want to be a software engineer anyways. And then it's when you actually see what goes on in the industry, it's enough to,
deter a lot of people. And that also keeps it very inclusive, where people who are a certain type of privilege have an easier time being able to make those concessions. Whereas a black single mother with the greatest game in the world can't do that. Yeah. And it's like you said, this is something that Waypoint.
Just jumping in there, that's why one of the greatest in the tech industry, specifically, one of the greatest forms of bigotry that is actually existing in there is ageism. And it's not really the industry is not set up for older folks. It's not, they want young people with no kids, no responsibilities.
That they want to turn them and burn them.
Exactly. They're going to use and exploit you as much as possible when you're there. And so when you're a young person, you have to do what you can to stand up in solidarity with the older workers and to say, look at, like, they're the ones that, just because you're not thinking about your pension and your retirement and your 401k. And that's the thing. A lot of these things don't exist. And a lot of the more indie companies and was the masses of people are working at are not AAA studios. And so there's, they're bringing you in, and in the tech industry, they don't have things like these developed like 401ks and pension funds and anything like that. And
not to mention a large amount of these people are contractors or third party studios just for hire hit guys that they bring in to help out on the game too. So so many of them are classified as contract employees, they still don't get the benefits of even working at the big company, and it's something that's interesting that you brought up about how it's just common knowledge. That's something that Waypoint tackled really well. That's worth saying. It gets to this scary place where you even have some people advocating against the change because they're like, that's how I cut my teeth. That's just, that's part of the industry. You got to get in there and put in the work. I had to put in the work. You should have to put in the work. And it's like, guys, like, come on, like, just because it's the way that things are doesn't make it right. It's foolishness for us to say that, like for us to be okay with something just because it's what's expected. It's victim blaming. It's a form of victim blaming. You knew what you signed up for when you took that job. You said you were willing to be exploited.
Yeah,
it's absolutely. The cost of doing business. What?
Yeah. And I think one other thing I would like to say is just that we should recognize these forms of exploitation and recognize that we're seeing it now, and we're more aware of it now in our sort of in the, programmer sort of, that's sort of engineer class of folks, and we're seeing that now, and we're recognizing it because they finally gotten around to exploiting us. You know, they were willing to, you know, give us a little bit extra here and there, but even when they give us a little bit more and you get higher pay, they will then slowly work to figure out how they can squeeze as much as possible from you for that higher pay. And so we got to recognize these things early and often, and also don't wait until it's happening to us to stand up in solidarity with working class people. We, as especially the engineer class, like, we are often working side by side in these offices with other workers that are not in the engineer class. They're not getting paid six figures. They're the, you know, the custodial staff. And a lot of these huge companies, I mean, you're talking about, they have like their own cafeterias, and they have cafeteria staff and cleaning staff, and they have all kinds of, like, you know, folks that they bring in like that, and the contractors and the QA testers and the folks like that. And we need to stand up in solidarity with them, you know, before the you know, the pain gets to us, before it gets to us, because by then it's like that old, you know, poem poem by, I forget what his name is, but he's like, it was like a German guy, I think, and he's like, you know, at first they came for the trade unionists, but I wasn't a trade unionist, so I did not speak up, you know. And then they came for the socialists, but I was not a socialist, so I did not speak up, you know. And then they came for the communists, I was not, you know. And then they came for the you know, the Jewish, and I wasn't a Jew, so I, you know. And then they came for me, you know. And but there was no one left to speak. Yeah, you know. And it's like, don't wait until they come for you and there's no one left to speak. You gotta recognize the exploitation, recognize that it's happening not just in our industry, not just in our workplaces, not just in our industry, but in all these other industries, and then get on board with things like the general strike movement. You know, I want to see engineers stand up in that. I want to see all the Amazon employees. I want to see the Google employees. I want to see all of them. I want to see them stand up in Epic Games and Apple and Microsoft, and I want to see all those engineers, the ones that are these privileged people, these folks that I had to, you know, sit shoulder to shoulder with. I want to see some of them stand up and you know, be willing to, you know, risk something in order to stand in solidarity with these other workers, these lower paid, you know, more heavily exploited workers. And I want to see us start to stand up. I've lost 2 jobs now. I've lost 2 jobs. I know at least one was absolutely just speaking out against systemic racism and sexism and injustice in the workplace. The second one was much more that, essentially, but it was a little bit more subtle of a way, and just standing up against some own personal, you know, some real egregious, you know, these were macro aggressions that were being done against me, not just micro aggressions. These were some damn macro aggressions, and some just downright racist shit from liberal people that were these well-meaning liberals that I worked with. And I've dealt with it too. But I've spoken out, and I've lost my job for speaking out, because I just can't sit idly by while people, you know, talk down or look down at working class people and feel like they're better than them, and not understand the pain and the suffering that that working class people, you know, go through every day, and what their struggle is, and to be a low income person, and these people that were not in the same, did not come from the same class as me, really. I'm much, you know, poor, you know, poverty. I've been on food stamps, you know, it's just these people from a different, you know, they're from like these like MITs and the Harvards and the, you know, the Ivy League schools, and just the people they surround themselves with. And so I want to see folks that are privileged like us using our privilege to stand in solidarity with the other working class people, and don't wait till it gets to the point of hurting us. Stand up now, speak out now, general strike right the fuck now. Right now, we should be, exactly, there's a general strike movement, and I don't want to see the engineer class left out of this. And for us to be on the wrong side of history, we need to stand up in solidarity with working class people, and it means recognizing that exploitation, one, in our workplaces and directly around us, because that's where that's the place where you have the most impact. It's one thing to speak out in general or in anonymity on Twitter, on social media. It's a whole other thing to, you know, put your own job online and say, I'm going to stand in solidarity with working class people. I'm going to stand in solidarity with the Black and brown people, the transgender people, the gay people, the you know, the women in my workplace. It's a whole, you know, it's another step entirely to take that stance and to fight for change in a real substantive way like that. And so I would really love to see that, and that would be very encouraging to me, to see that sort of solidarity from the engineer class.
And just to quick side note while we're talking about that, completely very side note. When we have this greater conversation, can we please not leave disabled people behind? Because it's very, very legal to pay disabled people very, very criminally low wages.
Yeah.
So when we have that conversation and we're looking out for marginalized people, I keep disabled people get left behind way too often. And they are some of, if not the most exploited.
Yeah. I mean, I often leave them out when I'm thinking of all these different exploited classes. I will often leave them out because that's how much the propaganda has worked to keep them out of the forefront of our minds. And I'm talking, physical disability, mental, disability, like these things, there's not nearly enough value placed on their lives and the importance of and
we know how intersections work. The ones who will feel it the worst are going to be even the more marginalized, the Black disabled people, the LGBT, just people with disabilities. Like, it's a lot. They're all intersections of this. So again, I implore you to weaponize your privilege and speak out when you can. That is why we did this, because we are privileged enough to be in a position where we can even attempt to do this to you. So we're going to weaponize our privilege and say this shit to you, that other people have these thoughts and these beliefs and these feelings and don't get to say.
Yep, absolutely. So and if you share these thoughts and please let us know, talk about it in the comments, drop us a line. You can hit us up on email if you want, Kwame at Raised Fist Media, Kahmali at Raised Fist Media. If you don't want to talk publicly, let us know. We won't share any information that you don't give us full permission to share, nothing like that. But if you just need someone to reach out to talk about these issues as a fellow comrade who has also struggled through things like this, please, we would love to hear from you. We really do. We really enjoy hearing from the community, and we would love to hear from you. So don't hesitate to reach out and let us know what you think. You can drop a comment in the chat, in the comments below if you're watching this after the fact. And if you haven't already, sorry to throw this in here, but please, I need you to like this video, subscribe, just hit that like button below. It takes like 2 seconds. It's like, boom, right there, somewhere, like right there somewhere. So hit that red button, that like button. If you're watching on Twitch, follow, and share this out. If you can afford it, please head over to patreon.com/raisedfistmedia and donate a few dollars a month, cup of coffee a month, really, and it will make a world of a difference. And it's literally the only way that this channel will continue to exist. We can't keep doing this forever, unfortunately, as much as we love to, without some financial backing for it. And so, we just have to grow, help independent Black left media grow and prosper by supporting the channel. So thank you so much to every one of our patrons. Oh, I want to give a special shout out to our newest patron, Temi. Shout out to Temi, our newest patron. Thank you so much for supporting the show. We love you, literally. And yes, deeply appreciate you. So thank you so much to new patron Temi. Shout out to Temi. Shout out. Yes. And that was a $10 patron, it looks like. So big patron. We appreciate 9. Yeah, 9. We have weird tiers right now. Sorry, weird numbers. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
We got a couple more comments.
I want to get up some of these comments. Want to comment just about something. A story that we talked about previously was just about that 30%. Thanatos Rose says 30% is so fucking much. What the fuck? Yeah, that's regarding that 30% fees on these platforms, and they're absolutely absurd. Yeah, totally agree. Tammy Van says, also, the younger / newer you are in the field, the lower the starting rate / salary you get paid. Yes, great point. Whereas generally older workers cost more to hire. So that's another bit to the ageism. Great point that should always be mentioned.
It's a weird bit of ageism that goes both directions. Like, older people are hurt in a way, but younger people are also hurt in a way. And the only person who wins is the damn company.
Absolutely. That's why we have to stick together. You know, young and old, we need to form solidarity and unite across these groups and across these demographics. So, you know, you should be outraged when you see, look around your office. If you work in the tech industry, do you see many older people working in your office? You know, that should be a concerning issue for you, you know? And so that's the sort of stuff that you just have to recognize. One day you're going to get older and you're going to be needing a job, and you can't wait till then, because who's going to fight for you then? You know,
and a lot of it too is it's the kind of industry you're also not going to see a lot of old people, because it's the protections aren't there. It's people get burnt out. It's a churn and burn industry. And that's why another thing where you maybe should pause and take a look around and wonder why there aren't a lot of people who last that long, you know, like what kind of environment is it?
Yeah. Is you really think there's something inherently wrong with all people, that as soon as they just get over a certain age, there's just something wrong with all of them, that they all individually are just terrible, awful, you know, people of low moral character, that they just could, you know, it's like clearly there's a systemic issue here, maybe.
Or maybe they're just pushing them out so they don't have to pay them more because they've worked there long enough to get a bunch of raises.
Exactly. You know, and they're more likely to use like health benefits and things like that. And so just, you know, they don't want to pay out into 401k, you know, and so they're more likely to demand things like health insurance on the job, and to demand good health insurance, which is going to cost the company more, because they're going to need that health insurance, because sadly we have an employer-based health insurance program here in the US. So we're stuck with sick things like that. So another comment from Tammy, she says, and a bit of the culture / knowledge of workplace politics. Younger / greener employees might question less about pension / benefits, etc., simply due to a lack of experience and simply not knowing. That's another great point. It's not just because of their actual like need for it, because of like, you know, you're getting older and that sort of issue, but it's also just like the lack of awareness, because they don't inform you about this stuff. And when you come into a job as a young person on a job, you're just trying to like fly under the radar and make sure that you can like stick around. And so you don't want to like ruffle any feathers or anything. So you're not going to go asking about this stuff. And also you just probably don't have the information. You've never been exposed to this stuff. If you grew up in the US for the last like 20-30 years, there's, you know, only 10% of people are in labor unions, where at its peak it was 30%. And so, yeah. And
in the worst case scenario, you look over to one of your coworkers and you ask them what's going on, and they look at you and say, "Kids, shut your mouth. Just be happy you're working on Diablo."
Yeah. So we can't allow that sort of culture to be pervasive either. And we gotta, you know, see that stuff, be aware of it, so that we can prevent, you know, call it out in our own lives and resist against it in our own workplaces and wherever we happen to work. You gotta, these movements are gonna happen, and it has to happen through, you know, the small places that we can control, our workplaces, our communities. A lot of times they're like, oh, just go vote. But voting doesn't often make a whole bunch of a difference, because they oftentimes don't give us the best choices to vote between. And so what you can really do to really affect change in your life is to try to fight for these rights within your workplace, where you actually have much more power, because you are just based on being a smaller part, you know, you're a bigger part of that smaller workplace. So, you know, you're 1 in 10 people or 1 in 50 people, as opposed to being 1 in 330 million. So you just have a louder, you know, voice in that democracy. So try to participate, try to create democracy through unionization in the workplace, or, you know, through building workplace democracy. And then we'll get some more democracy elsewhere. And then maybe voting would matter more. Tammy also says, I don't know about in terms of unionizing though, like which groups are more likely to participate in a union or starting a union. Yeah, I don't know either.
I'm assuming, yeah.
What do you think?
As far as like the younger versus older demographic, I believe she's piggybacking off her last comment.
Yeah. And what do you think? I don't know what the numbers are. I would definitely like to. I would assume it would make more sense for older to be most likely, because maybe they grew up in a generation where unions were a more normal thing, if I had to guess. And there's so much, I can promise you, as someone who was a young employee, there's so much anti-union conversation that goes on with people not knowing what unions actually do, or
oh, they don't do anything. They just take money out of your paycheck for nothing and a whole lot. So if I
Yeah,
had
no, no, you're right. I'm just looking it up, and it definitely appears that they just say by age, union membership rates continue to be highest among workers 45 to 64. Yeah, so it just seems, yeah.
once you know how good it is, you don't want to leave it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that makes sense that it'll just be less available to newer people, and jobs have become more and more precarious over time. I mean, more and more people are working in jobs that are like Uber and things like that in our generation than ever before, and so it's like this gig economy where you have none of these sorts of you have no chance for union membership at that, in those situations. And so
I'm just waiting for a Coder app, which is like the Uber version of coding. Because man, gig's gonna be the death of us all.
Right. So thank you to everyone who is watching. Thank you to everyone who has joined us today. Do us a favor, and if you haven't already, please hit that like button, subscribe, share this video, and if you can afford it, head over to patreon.com/raisedfistmedia and donate a few dollars a month to help this channel continue to exist. Please support independent Black left-wing media and help us to grow and to thrive. Yeah, we really appreciate everyone for joining us today. Please, if you have any other thoughts that you'd like to share, drop a comment. We will keep an eye out on the comments and read any last comments before we go. But otherwise, I think we are wrapping up here.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, again for tuning in. Again, like Kamali said, we can't do this without you. We love and appreciate all of y'all. If you haven't already, go check out quick video I did earlier this morning on this Netflix show, Cuties. Very quick, interesting one. And then some stuff that we'll have coming up for you soon. Definitely look out for a follow-up video coming up soon on the Rocksteady, because there is a second part to that. So we'll definitely tackle that. And we will, again, be doing a kind of broader or larger conversation about some of the allegations and the video game Me Too moment in an upcoming video soon as well. I think that's really all I have. Anything else you want to plug?
No, I just want to give a shout out to 2 of our new subscribers on YouTube. So we have 2 new subscribers as of a few hours ago, and that is Colopsia Kid and Sarah Nels, who I think we may know as a person. Yeah, so big shout out to these folks. Thank you so much to Sarah and to Colopsia for subscribing. Please, if you haven't already, anyone that's watching, subscribe. And we appreciate it, and you help the channel grow and to just continue to be a thing. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We appreciate y'all.